I'm Emily, 24 years old, with long blonde hair and green eyes. Lately, my life has taken a surprising turn, something I never expected. It all began when I started taking care of my father-in-law, Robert. I had no idea that living under the same roof would change my life so much, but life can be full of surprises when you least expect it. This journey began a few years back when I married David, my high school sweetheart. Our relationship was always filled with love and understanding, but like many marriages, routines started to creep in. David, focused on his career, began traveling for work more often, leaving me at home alone with no one to talk to. Over time, that loneliness settled in, and I started craving something more, some excitement that seemed to have faded away. Robert, my father-in-law, has always been a strong and striking figure. He is an elegant, charming man who, despite his age, carries himself with confidence that grabs attention wherever he goes. At family gatherings or social events, people often commented on how good-looking he still was, and I couldn't help but agree. Until then, I had always seen Robert as just my husband's father, someone to respect but nothing more. That changed dramatically after Robert had a serious motorcycle accident. He was hit by a car while riding home from work on a dangerous curve. While he survived, the accident left him temporarily unable to move around and in need of constant help. David, about to leave for another business trip, asked me with sincerity to take care of his father while he was gone. I accepted, thinking it was the least I could do for a man who had always treated David well. Little did I know, this decision would completely change my life. The first night I took care of Robert, I felt a mix of nerves and anxiety. There I was, by his bedside, ready to assist him with whatever he needed, completely unaware of how this new routine would shift my life. I cooked dinner and helped him eat since he struggled with basic movements. Even while recovering, Robert maintained a steady and intense gaze that made me feel uncomfortable. I noticed he was watching me differently than before. Initially, I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just the stress of his situation. I kept telling myself to remain professional. As the days passed, I grew accustomed to taking care of him, cleaning his room, preparing meals, and assisting him with light exercises for his recovery. Our conversations began to flow more easily. Robert, typically a quiet man, was opening up more, probably due to the vulnerability of his situation. He often complimented me, mentioning how lucky David was to have such a caring woman. While his compliments felt genuine, I sensed a deeper tension beneath the surface, a connection that seemed to grow stronger. That night, while helping Robert get ready for bed, something unexpected happened. As I adjusted the pillows, I caught him staring at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity, emotions I hadn't experienced before. He was lying down, yet his eyes remained fixed on me, making me feel as though he could see into my very thoughts. I quickly exited the room, claiming tiredness as an excuse, but inside, my heart was racing, and I needed a moment to gather my thoughts. The following night, the tension between us had noticeably escalated. It felt as if there was something electric in the air. As I helped him clean up, our eyes met again, and this time, I couldn't look away. My heart raced, and I felt a flush of warmth across my cheeks. He was gazing at me in a way I had never experienced, as if he understood all my hidden feelings. The line between caregiving and something deeper was becoming increasingly blurred, leaving me confused about how to handle it. On a rainy evening, while I was tidying up the kitchen, I heard Robert call for me from his bedroom, needing help getting into bed. As I walked in, I sensed that tonight would be different. Approaching the bed, the tension hung thick in the air. Robert looked at me with an intensity that made my body tingle. As I reached up to adjust his blanket, I felt his hand gently brush my waist, and in that fleeting moment, everything changed. That brief touch sent a wave of confusion through me. I stepped back quickly, my mind racing with what had just happened. This was not just a simple act of care anymore. It felt like a crossing of boundaries I had never anticipated. I tried to shake off the feeling as I focused on getting Robert settled for the night. He looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something deeper. Over the next few days, I found it increasingly hard to ignore the tension that hung between us. Our interactions were charged with unspoken emotions. Each meal I prepared, each time I helped him with his exercises, felt heavy with a connection I was not sure I wanted to acknowledge. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that I was reading too much into his lingering gaze. Yet, the truth was undeniable. The chemistry was real. David's trip seemed to drag on forever. I often found myself lost in thought about Robert during those lonely evenings. When I wasn't with him, I replayed our moments together in my head, questioning my feelings. Was it wrong to feel this way about my father-in-law? I felt a sense of guilt, but also a thrill that I couldn't shake. I tried to distract myself, engaging in hobbies and catching up on shows, but my mind would wander back to Robert. One afternoon, while I was tidying up his room, Robert caught my eye. He smiled at me, and there was something in that smile that made my heart race. "You know, Emily, I don't know what I would do without you," he said sincerely. Hearing those words from him struck a chord deep within me. It was more than just gratitude. It felt like an acknowledgement of the bond we were forming. As days turned into weeks, our relationship began to shift even more. We started sharing stories and laughing together, and I began to see a side of Robert the first hadn't noticed before. He was not just David's father. He was a man with hopes and dreams, someone who had lived a full life. I was fascinated by his stories, the adventures he had experienced, and I found myself hanging on to every word he said. However, that deeper connection made things even more complicated. I felt a sense of loyalty to David, yet there was a part of me that was drawn to Robert in a way I had never imagined. One evening, while watching TV together, our knees brushed against each other. The moment felt electric. I glanced at him, and he looked back at me with those penetrating eyes. My heart raced as I questioned what that touch meant. The nights became more charged with anticipation, and the lines between family and desire blurred further. I had always been a straightforward person, but I found myself tangled in emotions I didn't know how to express. I needed to be honest with myself and with Robert, but the fear of crossing a line paralyzed me. As David continued to be away, I grew closer to Robert. We developed a routine that was comfortable, yet it was becoming harder to ignore the desire building between us. One rainy night, as I helped him with his therapy exercises, he looked at me with such intensity that I could feel my cheeks heat up. "You're a remarkable woman, Emily," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. That compliment, combined with the way he looked at me, sent my heart racing. With each passing day, the connection we shared grew stronger, and it became increasingly challenging to resist the pull toward him. I often found myself wondering what would happen if I crossed that line. The thought was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. I had always been cautious about boundaries, but everything felt different now. Then came the night when everything changed. After finishing dinner, I walked into his room, prepared to help him settle in for the night. The air was thick with unspoken tension. As I approached him, I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The way he looked at me made it clear that we were standing at a crossroads. I had never felt such a mixture of excitement and fear before. "Can you help me with something?" Robert asked, his voice low. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. As I leaned closer to help him adjust his position in bed, our eyes locked, and the world around us faded away. In that instant, all my doubts and fears melted away. I was overwhelmed with the urge to lean in closer, to give in to the undeniable chemistry that had built up between us. It was a moment of pure connection, a decision that could change everything. As I hovered there, time seemed to stand still, and I knew I had to choose. Would I step back and maintain the distance, or would I embrace the feelings that had been growing between us? My heart felt like it stopped. I was frozen, unsure of how to respond. My mind was screaming at me to back away, but the strong urge inside me was louder. He gently pulled me closer, and before I could think things through, our lips met. Hold on, before we dive deeper into this scandalous tale, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It was a kiss filled with passion. Even though I wanted to resist, I found myself giving in. I closed my eyes and surrendered to the moment. The warmth of the kiss spread throughout my body, as if all the control I thought I had just vanished. Guilt lurked in the back of my mind, but the pleasure and excitement I felt were impossible to ignore. Even in his weakened state, Robert held me tightly, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away. We pulled apart briefly, and I gazed at him, trying to grasp the intensity of what just happened. Robert looked just as bewildered as I felt, but there was no hint of regret in his eyes. We both knew we had crossed a line, and instead of feeling remorse, the thrill of taking such a risk made it even more exhilarating. What began as a fleeting moment transformed into something much deeper, leaving a lingering craving for more. The next day, David came home. I was a bundle of nerves, my heart racing at the thought of him finding out about what had happened while he was away. To my surprise, he acted like nothing had changed. He greeted me with a sweet kiss and a warm hug, resuming his normal routine as if everything was perfectly fine. He had no clue. That temporary relief gave me the courage I needed to push forward. I knew I had crossed a line and done something wrong, but the thrill and excitement I felt with Robert left me wanting more. My life became divided into two distinct worlds, one where everything was stable and familiar, and another filled with desire and adventure. During the day, I played the perfect wife for David. I took care of the house, kept everything in order, and showered him with love and attention as I always had. But when I visited his parents' house, especially when we were alone, the atmosphere between Robert and me shifted completely. The looks we exchanged spoke volumes, and the little touches during family gatherings sent shivers through me. I could no longer deny my feelings for him, and it was clear that Robert felt the same way. The tension between us was palpable, creating an electric charge in the air that made every interaction a mix of anxiety and excitement. With each visit, the connection grew stronger. There was always that moment when our eyes met, and I could feel the electricity fill the room. We both knew we were playing with fire, but the danger of being caught only heightened the thrill. Living a lie, having a secret relationship with my father-in-law while still married to David, gave me a rush I couldn't shake. As time went on, my bond with Robert deepened. We didn't need words to communicate. One look or touch was enough to convey our feelings. We were connected in a way I had never experienced before. Despite knowing it could ruin my life, I couldn't shake the feeling of living this double life, and the secret consumed me. I was aware that I was playing with fire, but the excitement was addictive. Keeping up the lie became a part of my daily life, and even though I knew it could lead to trouble, I wasn't ready to extinguish the flame. The days after my first kiss with Robert were an emotional roller coaster. I felt torn between the guilt of betraying David and the growing desire for Robert. He filled a void I didn't even know was there. He was no longer just my father-in-law. He had become someone with whom I shared deep secrets. The bond we had was much more than simple attraction. Robert was also grappling with confusion. He understood what we were doing was wrong, but the connection was undeniable. It wasn't just about physical desire. There was something deeper, a silent understanding that grew stronger each day. He began treating me with a tenderness I hadn't expected, as if he wanted to shield me from everything, including the guilt I felt. It was like he was slowly stepping into the role of caretaker in my life, a big daddy, as I began to think of him. As David continued his business trips, Robert and I found more opportunities to spend time together. We used his doctor visits as an excuse to be alone. Little by little, I began to feel more comfortable with him than I ever had before. He became my rock, filling the emptiness that David had unwittingly created. Robert listened to me, understood me, and made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I remember one particular afternoon at my in-laws' house. Robert invited me to sit next to him on the couch. It was a warm day, and the window was open, allowing a gentle breeze to flutter the curtains. I felt my usual nerves around him, yet there was a strange sense of safety in sitting beside Robert. It was comforting, as if he could shield me from any potential fallout. "You look beautiful today, Emily," he said, flashing that smile that always left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you," I replied, managing a shy smile. "You look good too." Robert chuckled softly and placed his hand over mine, a simple act, yet it carried a heavy significance. "I enjoy our time together. It's been different, in a good way." I understood what he meant. Our connection was evolving into something far more profound than mere physical attraction. He was becoming a consistent and reassuring presence in my life, almost like a mentor, a guide, and a lover. I found myself growing attached to him in a way I wasn't sure was healthy. "I like it too, Robert," I admitted, looking down at our intertwined fingers. "I like it a lot." In that moment, I realized just how deep our bond had become. It wasn't solely about the secret meetings or our hidden relationship. Robert was becoming essential to my life, someone I didn't want to lose. He was more than a father-in-law, more than a man with whom I was having an affair. He was filling an emotional void I hadn't even recognized before. As our encounters became more frequent and intense, Robert treated me with a tenderness I hadn't known in ages. This care deepened my affection for him. Before long, we were sharing intimate moments almost daily. He transformed from being just a secret lover into a protective figure, someone who watched over me while I maintained the facade of a devoted wife. I was aware of the risks I was taking, yet I couldn't envision my life without him. David continued his work travels, oblivious to my duplicity. I played the role of the perfect wife while secretly building a life with Robert. The fear of being caught kept me on edge, but this very danger only heightened my excitement. The thrill of what I was doing intensified my desire to live each moment with Robert to the fullest. We began meeting at odd hours. Sometimes he'd call me to come over in the early morning before David left for work, claiming he needed assistance with something. Other times, he'd fabricate appointments in the city just for us to steal a few moments together. This double life thrilled me, filling me with a sense of exhilaration as if I were teetering on the brink of something dangerous yet irresistibly enticing. One day, Robert proposed that I spend more time at his house. He expressed concern about his recovery and how he might need care. Deep down, I knew he just wanted more chances for us to be together, but I agreed without hesitation. From that point onward, I began claiming to David that I was assisting his father during his recovery, allowing me to spend more time at my in-laws' home. As my visits to Robert's house became more frequent and our connection deepened, he treated me with an affection and dedication that I had never experienced before. Our relationship transcended mere physicality. It was an emotional bond that grew stronger every day. Robert effortlessly slipped into the role of protector, and I felt increasingly secure in his presence. What once were hurried, secret meetings evolved into longer, more relaxed encounters. We spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Robert opened up about his youth, revealing the adventurous spirit he once had. His nostalgic tales made me feel as though I was discovering a side of him that was hidden from everyone else, and I felt privileged to share these moments with him. Over time, my attachment to Robert intensified. He provided the attention and affection I lacked from David, filling a void I didn't even know existed. Gradually, I began to stay overnight at his house, claiming it was for the sake of caring for his father. But the reality was far more complex than that. I was leading a double life, and even though I knew it was wrong, I found it impossible to stop. Every time I lay down next to Robert, a mixture of safety and exhilaration washed over me. He held me lovingly, making me feel significant and cherished. In those moments, everything made sense. I felt joy beside him, and he seemed fulfilled next to me. As our relationship deepened, Robert began discussing our future in a more serious manner. "I don't know what's going to happen from now on, Emily," he said one night as we lay together, "but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I'll protect you." His words struck a chord within me. Robert was no longer just a lover, he was becoming indispensable in my life. I knew I was becoming more entangled in this situation, but the intensity of my feelings for him was too strong to ignore. I was walking a tightrope, balancing between reason and desire, right and wrong. I had always considered myself a rational person, yet here I was, swept up in an unforeseen whirlwind. On one side was David, my husband, the man who had been my sanctuary for so long, with whom I had built a life and a shared story. He had always been loving and devoted, but lately, something felt different. I couldn't pinpoint whether it was time or monotony, but our relationship felt increasingly cold. Conversations dwindled, physical touch became distant, and intimacy was nearly non-existent. Emotionally, he no longer fulfilled me the way he once did, and this absence created a void I hadn't realized existed. It was into this emptiness that Robert stepped, offering everything I hadn't anticipated but desperately needed. He was always there, always attentive, a true protector. Yet as time passed, this attention began to evolve, taking on new meanings that went beyond mere affection.